Groundhogs. Can we talk about groundhogs? Cute, cuddly, garden menace. And if you've got groundhogs in your yard, you know that if you want to have these, it's really hard to coexist with groundhogs. Welcome back to another episode of Out There JCH. I'm your host, Jonathan C. Hall. In today's episode, I'm dealing with a groundhog problem. This is not an episode for the lighthearted, but I try to make the best out of a situation that is really untenable. Without being able to communicate with groundhogs and let them know that I'd really appreciate them not eating little bites out of every single fruit that we have growing in our garden, I had to resort to some more permanent solutions. In Michigan, you're not allowed to trap animals and then move them to a different place. And so you have to deal with them in your own space. So I thought that this might be an opportunity to build some trapping skills, maybe some blowgunning skills, and just generally small game hunting skills. So let's see how things went. So I've got these snares from snares.com, and the snares seem to be pretty good quality, although the support for them in terms of instructional videos for somebody like me who's never snared an animal before is really not great. We've got our basic snare here. From what I can tell, the anchor point on the back where you would anchor the snare, and then the business end, the loop here, where you'd set the desired diameter, and then the animal comes through the snare and then gets tightened down, and you can see this washer here is really good at keeping the length the same. So I've got 3 of these snares. I'm going to set them around areas in the yard back there where I know groundhogs are traveling, and hopefully catch at least one groundhog today. The groundhogs are usually active around noon in the morning, around noon, and then in the evening again. I've got some carrots that I'm going to set out so that I can bait the groundhogs, and then the issue will be how to dispatch them once they're trapped. That will probably be a blowgun to the back of the head. I'm excited to get these snares going, and we'll see how they work. The last bit that needs to come through is this guy. Come on. There we go. All right, awesome. So that's anchored about an 8-inch diameter, 2 inches off the ground. Kind of screwed myself by putting this up here. Okay, so I've got this anchored. That's not going anywhere. Now to set this up in such a way that right in the path that the groundhog is going to move through. Like, you can clearly see that this groundhog is moving through this area. Okay, I think I am going to put it back over here because I don't have a way to anchor this such that it's going to be set up so the groundhog has to move through. There's just too many options for the groundhog to pass by in this path, this open path here, that I'm worried that they won't actually be trapped. Nice and anchored. Okay, so now what we'll do is open this snare to a size that the groundhog is going to be able to fit through, and I can set things up right about there so that when the groundhog moves through here, just maybe set that up right there. The groundhog moves through either this way or that way, it gets trapped and pulls on this snare. So looks like so I'm standing on top of like this area, this territory, but it looks like this area I can see prints coming out recently. So setting a trap here looks like it's going to be a good bet to start. And then there's this other path here that's fairly worn, and I think I want to, and then there's another hole. So this is the challenge of setting traps here, is that there's multiple places where he could come in and out. All right, so I'm going to try this hole and this hole. And that way I can move the cinder block here, put it there, and anchor both snares to that side. Now, if I get him to start moving through these other holes, that'll be advantageous for me to set up for shooting him with the blowgun. Okay, so this hole's got a lot of nice cover to it. And then this hole coming out of here, because I know that he likes to walk out and go into the yard. So if we set up snares for these areas, that'll be good. And if he starts to avoid these areas, then I know he's coming out of one of these holes and areas over here, in which case I'm more likely to drive him in this direction towards the yard where he can be trapped. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm set up the anchor point here, put the remaining 2 snares over these 2 holes, and hopefully catch him, and then we'll go from there. Okay, cool. Sounds like a plan. Okay. It was a lot easier the second time. All right, so that's anchored. And then I can set this on top of the entrance hole, and then set the width of my snare here. All right, there we go. That's nice and anchored. That's not going anywhere. And we set the snare here. All right, let me do this. I'll put 1 carrot here, 1 here, and then 1 here. There we go. Groundhog comes out, eats that, and then carrots on either side. Okay. In terms of eating the animals that are trapped, this might be a detriment because it's a good chance that I won't come across them until much later after they've been struggling in the trap, and that's going to be for meat that's not particularly tasty. But yeah, so he's coming through here, and I know where he's going, so I don't really worry about the setup in terms of on either side of the trap, because I know he's going to be going down into his hole. So the thing to do here would be to set things up so that he's eating by this hole, and then he goes down into that hole. So either I catch him coming out or going in. That'll make things tempting so that he's munching and feeling comfortable and feeling good, and hopefully keeping him away from the other holes that I don't want him to be at.
A few hours later.
Oh my God, he's there. The groundhog is actually there. I just came into the bathroom to have a pee, and he's there. And he's eating the carrots, but it's clear he's not trapped. And I think he's bypassed the snare. Yeah, he completely went by the snare. Let's see if he goes back. Oh, he's in the snare. He went right through it. Oh, he went right through it. So I can literally see the snare from the bathroom window, and the groundhog went right through the snare. So it's interesting. I was worried that the snare was going to be too big. I'll give it a little bit. I'm looking here, and it looks like he walked right through the damn snare. But I was right about the time. It's a little past 1 or almost 1 o'clock, and I just came to go to the bathroom and looked out the window, and there he was eating the carrots. Now I know. So the trap was tripped, but didn't get him. Carrots are gone. Well, we know that works. So the trap was down in the hole, but there's no groundhog in there. So we'll set it up again. All right, let's go check the other one. Oh, Jesus. Wow, I just created another hole. That was interesting. So now we have 2 holes. And nothing doing on this trap. Carrots are still here. They munched on them a little bit, but nothing. Okay, well, search continues. So, I've got one in the trap this morning. So I'm not exactly sure how I want to do this. I'm going to get quiet because I need to blowgun him.
So this part was really tricky. I had the groundhog secured to the snare and the cinder block, so they weren't going anywhere. But these are burrowing animals, and it was really difficult to get them on the other side of the fence. You can see that I tried the blowgun and missed, and also then hit them in the shoulder, and it became clear that that was not going to be the way to dispatch the groundhog quickly. So I had to resort to some more gruesome and barbaric methods. So I was able to get the groundhog through the fence so their head was on the other side. And so this is the part where you probably don't want to watch. It took a couple of bonks, and eventually the groundhog expired.
Or the original. Oh, she did already. Okay. She died last night. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. It's time to get the groundhog. There she is. All right. Let's unwind this. Oof, she is heavy and very warm. This snare is twisted. There we go. Wow. She is big. I had no idea groundhogs had bottom and top teats. We'll see what kind of condition her body is in. And make sure that we've got a good shot here.
I began butchering this groundhog the same way that I butcher and field dress deer, by cutting the skin around the wrist and ankle area, and then picking a limb and working my way either up or down the body so that I can begin to remove the skin. I briefly contemplated saving the pelt of the groundhog, but once I got up close, I saw that the fur was pretty thin, and I don't know if this has to do with the fact that I trapped this groundhog in spring, when having thick fur is not really advantageous, and maybe the fur sort of fills in the closer you get to winter and closer you get to hibernation. But in the springtime, the pelt was not really in a condition where I saw that I could make good use of it. A good proportion of a groundhog's weight is in its guts, particularly its GI tract. So once the guts were out, I was left with the meat equivalent of a medium-sized rabbit.
Wash your meat. This. Oop. Let me not spray groundhog all over my children's wheelbarrow here. Wash her down. Wash out the insides. It's looking pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Okay. We'll say that, like, groundhogs do kind of have a slimy sort of meat quality, but nevertheless, waste not, want not.
Once the groundhog is cleaned and skinned, most of the work in breaking it down is removing the glands that can be found in the calf and the armpits. But really, once you get the skin off of any mammal, they come apart relatively quickly. So I spent a fair amount of time after I got the groundhog quartered removing the brownish glandular tissue that was hiding in various spots. YouTubers said that you definitely don't want to leave those parts in, and given the way they smelled, that was good advice to remove them.
So I will put the carcass in a plastic bag and freeze the carcass. And then if the meat ends up tasting really good, then I can pull the carcass out and make like a groundhog stew stock or something like that. So yeah, it's always so wild to me that you have game and you get to the point where you've got the animal broken down and everything, how recently this animal was alive. You know, it's such a contrast from, I think, how most of us living in this settler society interact with the animals that we consume. It's not fresh, you know, it's been dead for a while. It's been processed by somebody else. We don't know what kind of care they took. We don't know what they thought about the animal that they're consuming, that we're now consuming. We don't know any of that information. But with this process, you know, I think it brings us closer to being in good relations with these relatives, because I can tell you the story of this groundhog, right? Took her life consciously, or I didn't do as good a job as I would have liked, dispatching her quickly. Tried to do as right as I could, given the circumstances and my inexperience. For that, I am in debt to that groundhog and all groundhogs, really. And so I've got a responsibility now to do right by these animals, share the story, and treat them with as much dignity as I can, which, you know, I think about this a lot when I see small game animals dead on the road and their bodies are just crushed and smashed, and certainly died for no other reason than larger mammal was passing through, couldn't stop their vehicle. The Pickleses perished so that my family can flourish. And to me, that's a better reason than just, you know, the whim of travel through a landscape. I feel like that's better than most folks of us in this settler society can give groundhogs. And the added connection of taking this groundhog into our bodies further cements the bond and the relationship that we have, and that we will continue to have. Better outcome, given the conflict that we had, wanting to establish a garden, grow things that are going to sustain us. I don't feel that we can just end their lives without acknowledging that they have just as much right to be here as we do. I really wish that we could communicate with them in a different way, provide food for them such that they wouldn't feed on the garden that we want to eat from. But I guess I say all that to say is, I don't feel that it's right to take the life of an animal on a whim, take the life of a relative on a whim, that you need to really think through why you're doing what you're doing. And then how can you do right by the fact that that relative had a life and had relationships. A life is taken. It's not for a whim. It's not for just the practice of killing, or, you know, because I don't like the animal or the relative, but it's because of some other purpose, and that there is some way to account for that purpose or account for the taking of the life. So, yeah, killing sucks.
Told you it'd be a lot. So not knowing how the groundhog would taste, I went with strong flavors. A barbacoa-style spice blend and some time on the charcoal grill. After the grill, it was 3 hours in the pressure cooker until the meat was fall off the bone, tender. I finished things off in a cast iron skillet and then put that deliciousness on a bun with some green chilies and homemade sauerkraut. Scrumtrulescent. Sorry I wasn't able to record more of the cooking process, but we had a lot going on that week. But if groundhogs do come back to our yard, I'll do a more in-depth cooking demonstration for you. Okay, that's all I've got for today, and I'll see you on the next episode of Out There JCH.